The year was 1887, and spring had come to Dust Vale beneath a low sky bruised with rain. The air smelled of wet earth and old smoke, and the train that hissed into the station seemed to exhale a sigh heavy with forgotten promises. When the whistle faded, she was still standing there, Rosie May Hollister, 28, in a faded pink dress that had once dreamed of a wedding. The letter in her hand was creased and damp, its ink bled into ghostly veins. The man who had written it, the one who was to make her his bride, had not come. The platform emptied, leaving behind only the echo of boots and pitying glances. Rain began its quiet work, blurring the edges of the world. Rosie watched the horizon where the rails vanished, as if her future had rolled away on the last carriage. Her suitcase was small, her savings smaller. Around her, the townsfolk pretended not to stare. A shopkeeper's wife murmured to a friend, loud enough to sting. Another one left standing. Poor thing. Rosie straightened, clutching her case as though pride were something you could hold. The station master gave a reluctant nod of sympathy before retreating to his office. The wind carried laughter from the saloon, careless and sharp as glass. She turned from the tracks, her shoes sinking into red mud. Dust Vale was a small town with too many eyes. Every porch, every curtain seemed to blink with judgment. She passed the general store, where the window's reflection showed her face, rain-slicked hair, a mouth pressed shut to keep from trembling. For a moment she imagined stepping inside, buying coffee, saying she was waiting for her husband to arrive. But the lie caught in her throat. She walked on. The boarding house smelled of soap and cooked beans. When she asked for a room, the woman at the desk eyed her from head to boots. "We're full," the woman said flatly, though the key rack behind her told another story. Rosie thanked her softly and stepped back into the rain. The door closed quickly, like the blink of mercy. By dusk, she had found an old barn at the edge of town, half collapsed and smelling of hay and rust. She crawled inside, her dress clinging coldly to her skin. Lightning flashed through the gaps in the boards, and for a heartbeat, the world looked like a photograph of itself, frozen, lonely, and beautiful. She lit a stub of candle and set it beside her suitcase. The flame trembled as though uncertain of its right to exist. She watched it until her eyes blurred, until the thunder became a lullaby. "Maybe I wasn't meant to be chosen," she whispered. Outside, the rain answered softly, as if in agreement. By morning, the candle had burned to nothing, and light leaked through the boards in thin, forgiving stripes. The sound of hooves approached, steady and calm. A man appeared in the doorway, broad-shouldered, rain still glistening in his hair. His eyes, a gray like unpolished steel, swept the barn before resting on her. For a moment neither spoke. "You lost?" he asked. She shook her head, just waiting out the rain. He studied her a moment longer, then nodded toward a bucket by the door. "Coffee's on the stove in the house. You can warm up." She hesitated. "I don't want to trouble you." "You already are," he said, without malice, and turned away. Rosie followed him through the drizzle to a small homestead crouched against the hills. The porch sagged, but flowers, wild irises and pale daisies, pushed through the cracks as though determined to live. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of wood smoke and horse leather. He poured her coffee into a tin mug and set it down without meeting her eyes. "I'll leave when the rain stops," she said quietly. "Suit yourself." He lifted his hat, revealing a scar that ran like a river along his temple. "Name's J. Calhoun." She nodded. "Rosie." He only nodded back, the silence between them thick but not unfriendly. Over the next days, she learned the rhythm of the place, the creak of the porch, the cough of the old stove, the way Jay's voice carried softly when he spoke to his horses. He was a man of few words and fewer smiles, but his presence steadied the air. Sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, not with hunger or pity, but with quiet curiosity. As though she were a page he wasn't sure he wanted to read. The town began to talk, of course. Dust Vale had a taste for stories, and a woman living under a man's roof was enough to feed every tongue. When Rosie ventured in for supplies, the general store went silent around her. You found yourself a generous cowboy, one woman said, voice sugar over venom. Rosie managed a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I found a roof that doesn't leak, she replied and walked out. Still, shame followed her like a stray dog she couldn't shake. Jay never mentioned the gossip. He went about his chores as though the world, beyond the fence, didn't exist. When Rosie offered to cook, he simply nodded. When she mended his torn sleeve, he muttered a gruff thanks that sounded like an apology. The silence between them softened into something companionable. Nights came quiet and long. She'd sit by the fire, the glow painting her skin gold, while he whittled bits of wood into shapes, birds, horses, once even a small heart he tossed into the flames before she could speak. One evening, rain returned, soft as memory. Rosie stood in the doorway, watching it silver the fields. Does it always rain this much? She asked. Only when trying to clean something, Jay said from behind her. She turned. And what's it trying to clean tonight? He looked at her then, really looked. Maybe both of us. The words lingered between them like smoke. Something in her chest shifted, an ache loosening its hold. She smiled, small and uncertain. The next morning brought sunlight sharp enough to cut through the fog. She walked to the fence line, gathering wildflowers that had sprung up overnight. Their colors, violet, gold, and white, felt almost like a promise. Jay joined her, his shadow falling long beside hers. You'll be leaving soon, he said. I suppose. He nodded, but didn't move away. The horses grazed nearby, tails flicking lazily. The silence between them felt alive, pulsing with something neither dared name. She wanted to tell him that leaving felt like tearing a root from the ground, that somewhere between the rain and the firelight she had found the first calm she'd known in years. But words seemed too fragile to hold it. Instead, she handed him a flower, a small white daisy, edges still damp with dew. He took it carefully, turning it between his rough fingers. You can stay till the next storm, he said finally. She laughed softly. That could be tomorrow. Then tomorrow, he replied. When she looked up, the sun caught his eyes, and for a moment she thought she saw the man he might have been before silence built its walls. The wind lifted her hair, carrying the faint scent of rain returning. In the distance, clouds were gathering again, dark, slow-moving, and full of promise. Rosie felt the air shift, heavy with a kind of tension that precedes change. Somewhere, thunder murmured a low warning, and Jay's gaze held hers with quiet gravity. The next storm was coming, and this time, she wasn't sure she wanted it to end. Spring ripened across Dust Vale as if the land itself wanted to forget the rain. Grass shimmered green beneath the sun, and the air carried the scent of wild sage and horses. Rosie stayed on at Jay Calhoun's ranch, though neither spoke of how long she would. Days bled into one another with quiet rhythm, her laughter among the chickens, his steady hammering at the fence line. They spoke little, but silence had changed its color. It no longer hid sorrow. It glowed with the faint warmth of belonging. In town, whispers thickened like dust. The preacher's wife claimed Jay had lost his decency, letting an unmarried woman live under his roof. Men at the saloon raised their brows, half jealous, half cruel. Rosie heard it all when she went for flour or mail, but she held her head high. She had endured worse than words. Yet each remark settled like grit beneath her skin, and when she returned home, her voice was quieter, her smile thinner. Jay noticed but said nothing. He'd always believed talking made things worse. One afternoon, she found him fixing the gate, shirt sleeves rolled, sweat shining on his forearms. The sight of him startled her. How solid he looked, how certain of his place in the world. She envied that certainty. They're talking again, she said. He didn't look up. Let 'em. Talking's all they know how to do. She hesitated, fingers clutching the wooden post. They think I'm shaming you. He finally turned, hammer resting at his side. Ain't no one got the right to tell me who's ashamed to me. His voice was even, but beneath it ran something fierce, protective, almost tender. That night she couldn't sleep. Wind moved through the grass outside like whispers turned gentle. She thought of Jay's scar, the way he always avoided questions about his past. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her, pity, affection, or just another stray creature he'd decided to shelter. When dawn came pale and soft, she resolved to leave before she blurred the line between gratitude and something dangerous. She rose early, packed her few belongings, and found him in the yard, feeding the horses. "Jay," she said, the word almost breaking, "I should go. I've stayed too long." He didn't turn. "You leave, you'll be walking straight into more rain." "Then I'll learn to get wet." His hand froze on the horse's mane. "You think you're trouble to me?" She met his eyes. "I think the world believes I am." He stepped closer, boots grinding in the dirt. "The world's got small thoughts. I don't." The space between them throbbed like a heartbeat. Still, she lifted her chin, stubborn. "It isn't fair to you." "Fair's a fool's word," he said quietly. "Ain't about fair. It's about worth." Before she could answer, thunder rolled far off in the hills. The horses snorted and stamped. Within minutes, the sky split open, rain spilling hard as stones. They ran to the barn, laughing breathlessly as lightning cracked the horizon. Inside, the smell of hay and storm filled the air. A mare in the corner kicked at the straw. Her time had come early. Rosie dropped to her knees beside her without hesitation. Jay joined, his rough hands steadying the creature as she struggled. The rain outside became a roar, echoing the chaos within. Rosie murmured to the horse, voice soft as lullaby. At last, the foal slid free into Jay's arms, trembling and alive. For a long time, they knelt there, soaked and shaking, the newborn's small cry breaking through the thunder. When the storm eased, they sat side by side in the hay, steam rising from their clothes. Jay stared at the foal as if seeing a miracle. "You ever think storms bring things instead of taking 'em?" he asked. Rosie smiled, tears mingling with the rain on her cheeks. "Maybe that's all they ever do." His gaze shifted to her, lingering. "You don't have to leave, Rosie." Her breath caught. "And if I stay?" He reached out, brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "Then maybe I stop living like half a man." Days passed, brighter and easier. They worked together, talked more freely. Sometimes she sang while hanging laundry, and he would pause his work just to listen. The gossip still circled, but it grew weaker, drowned by the season's renewal. Still, Dust Vale's judgment was not done with them. One afternoon, Sheriff Clay Brenton rode up, rain-dried dust clinging to his coat. "Jay," he called, sliding from his horse. "Town's buzzing. Folks think this arrangement's improper. Preacher says it's time you make things right." Jay's jaw tightened. "And what's right to them?" "A wedding," the sheriff said simply. "Or her leaving." Rosie, standing on the porch, felt the blood drain from her face. The sheriff tipped his hat, apologetic but firm. When he rode off, silence filled the yard like smoke. Jay turned to her slowly. "They think they can decide for us." "Maybe they can," she whispered. "I don't want you forced." His eyes darkened. "You think I'd do anything I didn't choose?" That evening, the town gathered for the spring fair, lanterns swinging from poles, fiddles crying out over laughter. Rosie tried to stay home, but Jay appeared at her door, coat clean, boots polished. "We're going," he said. "They've stared at you long enough from shadows. Time they see you in light." Her throat tightened. "I can't face them." He smiled faintly. "You already have. Every day." At the fairgrounds, conversations halted as they entered. Lantern light washed her pink dress, the same one she'd worn the day she was abandoned at the station. For a moment she felt that same sting of humiliation, the eyes, the whispers. But Jay's hand found hers, solid, unshaking. They moved through the crowd until he stopped before the preacher's table, where townsfolk watched with greedy anticipation. The music stilled. Jay's voice carried low but certain. "I reckon folks want to hear I've chosen her out of pity." A ripple of murmurs. He looked at Rosie, and his next words were softer, raw. "Truth is, I didn't choose her at all. She just kept showing up, in the quiet, in the rain, in every damn place I'd forgotten how to look for grace." The crowd shifted uneasily. "But today," he continued, "I'm choosing. Because some things deserve to be said plain." He turned fully toward her. "Rosie May Hollister, will you be my life partner?" The world seemed to still. The wind fluttered her skirt, lifted her hair like a whisper of wings. She couldn't speak, only nod, tears slipping silently. Jay smiled, a small, unguarded thing. The preacher cleared his throat, muttering a prayer no one quite heard. Around them, rain began again, soft and silver, blessing rather than condemning. The fiddle resumed, tentative at first, then bright and wild. Jay pulled her close, their foreheads touching as they swayed in the drizzle. As they danced, townsfolk began to murmur differently, admiration where judgment had lived. The preacher's wife lowered her gaze. Even the sheriff smiled, tipping his hat. Under the rain's soft applause, Rosie realized that love had not found her in the letter of some stranger, but in the quiet defiance of a man who refused to let the world decide what was decent. When the song ended, Jay kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're home now." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of a heart that had finally stopped running. The lanterns shimmered through the rain, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and possibility. Above them, thunder rolled far away, not a threat this time, but a promise. The storm that had once stranded her had returned only to bless what it began. And as the rain washed over Dust Vale again, Rosie closed her eyes, certain that, for the first time in her life, she had been chosen, not by fate, not by chance, but by love itself.